Okay, a couple things before we get started here. Chapter 3 for Thursday. The first time I taught in Malloy, I taught on Fridays. I taught 2 3-hour classes back to back. It was crazy. And in the academic world, most people get Fridays off for teaching. I'll tell you right now. I laugh at people who go, isn't that great, you're done by 2 o'clock? No, I go home and I have to do research and stuff. And there's nobody there over top of me going, you better get this done. So anyway, one of the things that this allows us to do in this longer semester period, this is the point I'm getting to, is to read each one of these chapters very carefully. If you notice, chapter 2 is very, very short. Those of you read it, what was it about? What was one of the main subjects? Obviously related to chapter 1. Yes, tell me your name.
Nick.
Go ahead.
The Big Five that went into detail about each company and how they started.
Right, and also one of the things they detailed was the relationship they had with other companies. Let me read this real quickly here. On 28 and 29. I think this is a good way to start. One of the things that we have to keep in mind here is that media conglomerates and companies and mergers and acquisitions, particularly in light of the recent economic downturn, have been accelerating, decelerating, changing, shifting shapes. Some companies that had merged in the past to become the Big Five now have divested their interest, and now it's this is actually even out of date. This website was done about 3 years ago, and it's already out of date, and it calls it the Big Six, and separates out some of these companies. But again, the main point here is not merely how many companies there are, what the name of these companies are, but more importantly, what they control in general, and also the interlocking relationships that they have with other media companies. You may have to go get a desk. Okay, great. Yeah, we got to make sure there's enough desks in here. Anyway, and we're going to talk today about the propaganda model. Today we're going to talk about the propaganda model, what this concentration of, not only the concentration of media does to content or your elements of choices. Like for example, just to show you one element, whenever a cable company gets into an argument with one of these companies, you know what happens? Those of you who are Knicks fans know this one well. If you're is it Time Warner that's doing this right now? What's Time Warner doing?
They're trying to take out MSG now.
And at one point, Cablevision got into a fight with Fox, and they were going to stop Fox during, I can't remember what it was, something was the Oscars or something like that, and there was a bunch of other stuff going on as well. Maybe
it was a playoff baseball.
Well, okay, yeah, right, which again, in New York, you really, and again, what's interesting is, who got hurt in this argument between Time Warner and who's getting hurt between the argument between Time Warner and MSG? Huh? Yeah, the viewers, right? It's not hurting Time Warner or anything. Just pass it back there. Just hold on to it, whoever's got it. But one of the issues here is not just the fact that all these media companies own these outlets. That's bad enough that conflict theorists would suggest, as well as Ben Bagdickian. What the bigger issue is that on these corporate boards are the members of other companies like Apple and ExxonMobil. They're on Fox News' board. They're on News Corp's board. They're on Time Warner's board. Time Warner itself, if you read here, is the largest media conglomerate. That's not actually true by market cap. Disney as a sole media outlet is the largest. And if you notice, GE at the top there was 150-some billion market cap. First of all, it's not their market cap anymore because of the market. But GE also makes a lot of consumer electronics. I think my refrigerator is a General Electric. They also used, at one point, I don't know how much they still do this, they used to make defense equipment, including things that went into nuclear weapons. So, and they got roundly criticized. Tim Robbins actually made fun of them on their own network on Saturday Night Live. So anyway, but let me read this part and you'll start to understand this interlocking relationship, and we'll discuss why this is important. Why is it important to know that Time Warner gets 20% of their ad revenues from Apple? And how does that play into how CNN treats Apple, or treats subsidiary companies that work for Apple? For example, Foxconn. You may have to go get a chair from Zoom. I guess I can move this book back. If you can find a desk, bring it in there. Anyway, so let me read this. This is on page 28. It goes on, but he's talking about this element of impact on media content, and he starts out here on 28, continuing. He says, if, however, one looks at the properties of the dominant 5, or 6, whatever you want to call it, it provides some insight into how it could have happened. Their steady accumulation of power in the world of news, radio, television, magazines, books, and movies, and now the internet, to some extent, gave them a steady accumulation of power in politics. Political leaders and parties know that the news media control how those politicians are depicted to the voting public. So this is not only important from an economic standpoint, but if you actually look at it, and I was listening to an NPR story the other day in Florida, and there's a Republican primary going on down there, and they were talking to this woman about how she was making up her mind about who to vote for. She said, well, I need to do more studying. And where do you think she's going to get the information from? Huh? Martin?
The internet?
But more specifically, what types of sources?
CNN.
News sources, right? And here's the problem. Are news sources always accurate or fair or balanced? Part of it is an issue of limited space. You only have so much space in a newspaper article. With the internet, it's not so much the case. You only have so much time for a TV news story. You know, the average is 3 to 5 minutes for a story, sometimes less than that. How can you articulate to the public the differing positions of each one of the candidates in a 2 to 3 minute bit? And that's part of the crux of the problem, is that we as consumers use the news media to make decisions about what to invest in or what kind of jobs are really hot right now. And then we also use it as citizens and political beings when we make our decisions at the polls. And in a democratic capitalist country where individual decisions are, when they aggregate and create the whole economy, serious mistakes can happen. When the press is not as forthcoming or is favoring one candidate over another or is allowing corporations to engage in behavior that's questionable, like AIG. CNBC knew some of this stuff was going on. And probably won't show this today, but on Thursday, I will show you, everybody here watched Jon Stewart or seen Jon Stewart on a Daily Show. He was absolutely infuriated by what happened in the market. And he's not a traditional reporter, he's a comedian, and he's a satirist, and he makes fun of stuff, but he understands the news, and I think he understands probably a lot better than most comedians do how the world works. Maybe Bill Maher is up there to some extent. He's a pretty smart guy, Dennis Miller and all these people. But again, I will show you some scenes where he was showing how CNBC was telling people to buy stocks when the market was essentially collapsing. People like Jim Cramer, commentators on the show, they were allowing CEOs to come on the show and go, hey, nothing's wrong with our business. Of course they're going to say that, right? It's like McDonald's. Do you think they're going to say, yeah, our food's terrible, but you know what, it's cheap. It reminds me, there was actually a movie with Dudley Moore in it called Crazy People. And it was about an advertising agent who goes, let's just tell the truth. He's like, we can't tell the truth, we're in advertising. And everybody, in the late 80s, if you ever seen a Volvo, they were boxes on wheels. And one of their advertisements was, his new advertising was, Volvo, they're boxy, but they're good. Like being honest with the public. And very rarely do you ever see, corporations seem to be, along with politicians, the only one who can like overtly lie about something. Like, does Sprite make you jump up in the air 400 feet? Does Red Bull really give you wings? You know, is McDonald's food really delicious? Maybe when it first comes out of the microwave. And you heard me. I'll tell you right now, when I worked for McDonald's, everything got microwaved except for the French fries and the McNuggets. Everything.
Really?
Yes.
Not meat.
Huh?
Meat patties didn't.
Well, but they made this. When I worked there, it may be different. Did you work there recently?
Several years ago.
Okay. So, but they may have changed the thing. When I was there, you would make Big Macs and you would make cheeseburgers and put them in the wrapper and then put them in the microwave for like 30, 40 seconds so they were steaming hot. So people thought they were fresh. That was the point. But the problem was it made the buns real hard. It like messed up the food. I mean, you know this. You ever put something in the microwave long enough? You ever put a marshmallow or a hot dog in there? I mean, the microwave is a destructive thing. Okay? I mean, it can do some damage to stuff. Good. Don't do this. This is more like a jackass thing. If you put aluminum foil in there, turn it on, it will explode. Okay, it's not a game. But they hated it. I used to go up to the front and go, hey, we need 20 cheeseburgers microwaved. And the manager would be like, shh, be quiet. Anyway, they should have been more concerned about the cleanliness of the back instead of the microwaving. Anyway, take that next time you go down there. So again, politicians are interested in what media companies do, and here it goes on. The more powerful the influence over politicians in national policy, prudent politicians treat the desires of all large corporations with care because they have a lot of employees, they're powerful and important people, and they give money to the campaigns. But politicians treat the country's most powerful media corporations with something approaching reverence. Maybe not now. That political awe has permitted the 5 dominant media firms to ignore or make laws that let them absorb the lion's share of the 37 different media outlets in the United States. The number jumps to 54,000 if one counts all weeklies, semi-weeklies, and advertising weeklies, and all periodicals, including strictly local ones. The number becomes 178,000 if one counts all information industries, and this is all controlled by 5 or 6 major companies. Some writers' commercial guides claim that they can find 7,700 local book publishers for authors. Whatever the number, U.S. communication systems are formidable. This book deals with the media, daily newspapers, national distributed magazines, broadcasting, and motion pictures used by the majority of Americans and their influence on the country's politics and policies. Political leaders hunger for continuous favorable treatment in the big media, and they don't care how they get it. You got to buy it, bribe it, cajole it, it doesn't matter. Whether you have to kiss someone's butt, whether you have to lie. You know, if you ever watch Meet the Press, they get down these candidates' throats. But you rarely ever see, I wouldn't say never, but you rarely ever see Newt Gingrich go, you know what, you media people are just scums. I have no respect. And you know that, do you really think politicians have respect for media people? You think when the president sat down with Bill O'Reilly, he was like, I'm going to go with this guy, I have a lot of respect for. You know, Anderson Cooper's a real smart guy the way he chases hurricanes around. That's how he made his living. And what's so funny is that when he would go down to do hurricanes in Florida, they would stand in the vest, they would be in the side, like the lobby of the hotel, and then they would step out to do the camera with all the wind blowing, and then step back in. But it would look like he was out in the middle of nowhere, and like he was getting blown around. So, anyway, but the point is, politicians know if you look good in the media, that is going to translate into votes. Period. Okay? A lot of people were critical that people were being too hard on Hillary and they were being too light on Obama. I don't know if you guys remember the Saturday Night Live skits? This is a while ago, so some of you were still in high school. But there were Saturday Night Live skits that sort of made fun of the fact that, first of all, during all the debates, they would ask Hillary the question first, and then Hillary would say her answer, and Obama would be able to hear her answer and say something either similar or something different or attack it. And then they were trying to hint at the fact that Obama was getting softball questions. Like they wanted him to win a nomination. And they made fun of it at one of the debates. They had one of the debate questionnaires ask Obama, it was like, the first question is for you, Mr. Obama, are you comfortable? You need anything? You need a pillow? Like that kind of crap. But they're sort of, even though that's satirical and they're making fun of it, what it hints at is something very serious. That if you're able as a politician to bamboozle or get the media, not only the media itself, but media personalities like Anderson Cooper to drink your Kool-Aid, so to speak, or to just, kind of cozy up to you, that being friends with these people has a tremendous benefit, right? And traditionally the media has been accused of being liberal, or at least liberally slanted, and I certainly think you can make that a charge at things like the New York Times, to some extent. But Bagdickian's saying the exact opposite. He's saying, look, all right, maybe sometimes they look like they're supporting liberal issues like gay marriage or abortion or something, but in general, very rarely do major media outlets attack corporations, do they? I mean, even when AIG did all this crap, did you hear them get excoriated? Did you hear people saying that the bailout was outrageous and that AIG should go down? Did you hear anybody on the media say that? I didn't. And I watch a lot of media, so. Anyway, continuing here. The Big Five hunger for the $236 billion spent every year for advertising in the mass media, and approximately $800 billion that Americans spend on media products themselves. We're talking an industry that is upwards and now well above $1 trillion. Okay? There are people that will shoot somebody in the face for $20. Imagine what they're going to do for $1 trillion. I always tell people that it's sort of the story of the day. I mean, I know people will kill you for $1,000. Imagine what they're going to do when they find out somebody stole $15 trillion from them. Okay? And run for the hills. All right? Anyway, but again, I think what is key here is that the more, this is sort of a general equation. The more money involved in an industry, the more it draws in crazy elements, questionable elements, unethical behavior. The more money and the less regulated an industry is, the more kind of, in conflict theory language, the more kind of monsters get involved in this, you know? Look at the oil industry. I mean, these are not companies that you want to hang out with and be a part of. I mean, do you really want to be a part of ExxonMobil? Or BP, who just polluted the Gulf of Mexico? How long did it go on? 40 days? That stuff was spewing out oil? I mean, good God. But again, people are willing, when there's a lot of money on the line, $1 trillion. Let me put it this way: if you guys just had 1% of that, you'd be beyond wealthy. You know, you'd have $80 million or whatever, or $100 million. I mean, I'll take that. Frankly, I'll take this half a million. I'll see you later. You know. Anyway, but people do crazy things for money. In 2002, for example, the average consumer spent $212 for basic cable. Man, you get ripped off. I pay $180 for phone, cable, and internet. Anyway, $100 for books. That's not happening anymore. You can't even find a bookstore. It's like Blockbuster. Anyway, there's still a Blockbuster in Port Jefferson Station, though. I don't know why, but anyway. $110 for home videos. That ain't happening either. $71 for music recordings. That's probably actually a lot higher than we send now, right? $58 for daily newspapers. That's mainly older people. $45 for magazines. How many people here read a magazine on a regular basis? That's still actually pretty good. You can still make a pretty good living making a magazine if it's a good magazine. There's a lot of, and if you go to the grocery store and go to the magazine rack, is there any dearth of magazines on the shelf? Is there a scarcity of magazines on the shelf? I don't think so, right? I mean, there's like at least 5 muscle magazines, which I guess people on steroids like to buy magazines. So I guess they want to find out what's happening to their body. But I mean, if you look at it, it's Car and Driver. There's like all these things: muscle car magazines, fashion magazines, celebrity magazines, all this stuff. It's quite fascinating that has survived. Also, I feel somewhat mixed about this, but I still think it's an interesting point. The National Enquirer has survived throughout all of these things. The National Enquirer is quite an old magazine. Actually, they were nominated for a Pulitzer, I think, for the John Edwards story. Remember when he was cheating on his wife? And she was dying of breast cancer in the hospital? Anyway, so magazines are still somewhat important. $45 for online internet services and $36 on movies. I know people spend $36 a week on movies. It is not surprising that a country with 208 million people, now it's 308, living in more than 100 million households, is a marketplace that has led ambitious entrepreneurs, no longer inhibited by former government rules, to congeal into a small handful of corporations. The fewer the owning corporations, the larger each one's share of the annual harvest of the billions of consumer dollars. So what they're saying is, the more companies there are out there, the less money each one of these companies is going to make. So it's actually in their benefit to merge with each other. You spread the costs out over a larger employee pool. And you are developing, you're gaining more market share, you're gaining more production value. The thing that they're fighting over now is who owns the rights to content online. That's one of the big fights now. Does Disney own this, or can it be put on YouTube and I can put a commercial on it and then that's the same as TV? And I think especially cable companies, which many of these big six are a part of, cable companies have still not figured out a way to live peacefully with the fact that at some point, and Apple's going to try this, that you will be able to watch cable television or some form of like broadcast television on your computer and not have to buy a cable subscription or a satellite. That scares the hell out of Comcast. And you see, Time Warner runs a cable company. They also make production. Time Warner makes movies. Time Warner makes music. Prince is part of Warner Brothers. That's why he takes his stuff off of YouTube. Okay? He's big enough to do it. Everybody else has to sit down. Okay. Anyway, if you actually look at this as well, some of these elements here, this lists some of the properties that they have. What's that piece I have here? I think it's in the first chapter, actually. Listen to this. This is on page 8. So, though not a literal cartel like OPEC, the Big Five, in addition to cooperation with each other when it serves a mutual purpose, have interlocking members on the boards of directors. An interlock exists when the same board member sits on the board of more than one corporation. This is illegal only if the interlock firms would form a monopoly if they merged. According to a study by Aaron Moore in the March-April 2003 Columbia Journalism Review, News Corporation, Disney, Viacom, and Time Warner have 45 interlocking directors. I thought they were supposed to compete. What's the problem when you have a situation where companies are no longer really competing, just pretend to compete? Which is what I think what grocery stores are doing. Do you really think that King Cullen and Stop and Shop and Waldbaum's are in competition with each other? Because everywhere I go, milk's the same price, bread's the same price, it's everything's the same price. What's the problem with having interlocking directors?
It's like a monopoly.
To some extent. Go ahead.
We don't get the best price.
Right, so one of the major things that happens is cable companies can raise their rates, or a movie production company, or somebody selling. What else? What about just the elements of interest here? Here's one of the issues here. Obviously, most of these, if not all of these media conglomerates own news outlets. What happens to the available range of information and criticism, particularly of corporations or political institutions, when these boards are populated by people who are from other companies like ExxonMobil or Nabisco or worse, tobacco companies or Starbucks?
Then they censor it to make themselves look good, or they don't talk about the bad stories that happen.
Right, potentially, right? And not only that, but they do things that look like news stories and say stuff like this. Coffee helps prevent diabetes. Don't you think Starbucks loves that? Hershey loves this one. Dark chocolate's good for your heart. So's pomegranate juice, and it doesn't have saturated fat in it. Here's to show you that of how dominant a lot of these companies that are on these boards sell junk food or candy. When do you ever see an advertisement for cauliflower or broccoli or lettuce? You see orange juice because it's cooperative, but rarely do you ever see healthy foods being promoted or other things like that. It's quite interesting, right? But listen to this here. It is a more significant cooperation that closely intertwines all five into a mutual aid combine. The dominant five media conglomerates have a total of 141 joint ventures, which makes them business partners with each other. To me, it reminds me of professional wrestling. Why is that a good analogy? Here. Go ahead, Mark.
They're all acting like they don't like each other, but
Right, but behind the scenes, they're like, man, that was great. We were riled up the crowd. The difference is, people in the audience, although my cousin, every time I tell him that professional wrestling is not real, he puts his hand over his ear. And this is a 35-year-old man. He's probably going to watch this. And I'm like, it's not real. I got a couple friends that are that way too. But the difference is the audience knows this is crap, right? This, I'm not sure everybody realizes the interrelationships. I think they have an idea that it's like the gas companies. When did you ever see one gas station selling gas at 40 cents lower than the other one?
No.
Yeah, you'd think that somebody would be able to get a hold of it. I got to drive to New Jersey to get gas under $3. Thank God for New Jersey. But that's one of the I bet that's one of the only times someone said, "Oh, I can't." Anyway, I like New Jersey actually. It's like Canada. I give them a lot of crap, but I love them to death. I wouldn't have any other. They're our best friend. I'll tell you right now. If we ever get into a war, Canada would be right beside us, going, "Are you sure about this? Can't we find another way to solve this problem?" Australia always likes to get in fights with us too, but I think it's just because they're surly and aggressive. They're very much like us. Anyway, like to drink, like to fight. To cite only one example, News Corporation shares a financial interest with its competitors in 63 cable systems, magazines, recording companies, and satellite channels in the United States and abroad. All five join forces in one of Washington's most powerful lobbies. Listen to this. The National Association of Broadcasters to achieve the laws and regulations that increase their collective power over consumers. In 2000, for example, the National Association of Broadcasters spent $2.5 million lobbying on communications issues using 24 of its own lobbyists plus 4 independent lobbying firms, and that year made 64% of its campaign contributions to Republicans and 36% to Democrats. This is in addition to the lobbying campaign money spent by the major media corporations on their own. That doesn't even count what Time Warner itself spent. Right? And I think that, I think I mentioned this last time, there's a statement that if you like sausages and laws, you shouldn't watch either one of them being made. And it's very much the truth when it comes to these communication laws. You would be, some of you at least would be, some of you wouldn't be shocked at all, but some of you would be absolutely appalled at the way, the greasing of wheels that goes on in Washington. The shifting of money, the trading of favors, the little wink wink, I'll put your bill on there, don't worry about it, take care of you. That kind of crap that goes, that's absolutely legal on a lot of levels. Like if Martin's a representative, I can't go, here, just $5,000, dude, for your own personal use. Make sure you vote with me on this bill. I can't do that, but this is what I can do. Here's $5,000 for your re-election campaign, buddy. Wink. Wink, wink. Huh? You think I'm giving, do you really think that somebody's going to give $5,000 and not expect something back? Or 50, or 100,000, or 500,000? I mean, and what I love about it, again, it's like this con game of the politicians will stand up there, and the president will even say this. That's just so I can run for office. That has no bearing whatsoever on my decision-making process. I mean, it almost like the politicians think we're all 3 years old or something. Like, oh, Santa Claus is real. It's like, come on with this. Do you really think that there's no influence there? And also the fact is, do any of you give $5,000 to the president? And that's why he's not coming here, and he's not coming here to give a speech. Okay, he might come to the university, right? Does the president ever come here? Has the governor ever come here? Cuomo came to St. Joseph's for some reason, in Patchogue of all places, too. He didn't even go to the Brooklyn one. He went to Patchogue. Which, if you've ever been there, it's about as big as a high school. It's like stuck back in a neighborhood. It's kind of cute. It's a cute little school. Anyway, but you see here these interlocking elements that create this situation that constricts information. And sort of the model here. I'm going to talk about this here in a second. Is look, here's the range of discourse in society, from right wing to left wing or whatever. Let's just call this political commentary, right? What they're saying is because of these 5 or 6 companies, whatever you want to, so the big 6, acts like a filter. Anyway, and sort of constricts things to where, hey, no corporate criticism and political support. You want things like the bailout never really get questioned. Here's one thing, though. What major companies did he not talk about at all that are a force? One of them is about ready to go public, which to get my hands on some of the shares. Some guy that owns a company, his name's Mark, jumped out of Harvard. What businesses wasn't he talking about?
Facebook.
Yeah, and Google and all these companies, right? That are Oracle, all these companies that are involved. Here's the thing. One statement is that the internet helps to widen this back out. That's one theory of society is that if you close down something somewhere, this actually happened. There used to be a lot of drugs that came through Florida, and the FBI and the state authorities closed down that corridor for the most part. There's still a lot of drugs. And then guess what happened? Did the drugs stop coming into the United States? Where'd they start coming in at? The Mexican border over Texas. So it's sort of, you get, and they were able, the companies were able to constrict information for quite a while. And then the internet, which is like the Wild Wild West, opened up, and it was the Drudge Report and the Smoking Gun and Napster and all this stuff. And not only did information increase the availability, although the reliability is something else, and we'll talk about that as we go on. Not only did the availability of information, but also the way these media companies made money in the past started to be attacked. Napster, YouTube, called into question. Like, if I'm a cable company, I hate YouTube. And Hulu and all these companies, they're screwing my business up. Why would anybody buy a subscription to cable when you can get most TV? And if you're like, for example, if you only like 1 or 2 shows on TV, what's the point of having 100, 200, 300 cable channels? And those of you who have cable, isn't most of the time it's just crap. I mean, there's a famous song from Bruce Springsteen. It's 57 channels and nothing on. And it's to say 570 channels and nothing on. Right? But he was joking about that. The story of the song is that he went and bought a satellite dish. And then all he did was sit around and watch TV, and yet he was still nothing on, and so it was sort of, I can't stop watching, but there's still nothing on. Luckily with the DVR, it's really freed people. There's another thing too. DVRs have busted up the ability, or at least reduced the effectiveness. The only time I stop for an advertisement is when there's either a product I like or an attractive person like Kaylee Cuoco or somebody like that talking. Or something like that. I mean, if you put a commercial with Gwen Stefani and I'm going to stop it. I'm not going to buy Maybelline makeup, but I'm going to stop and watch Gwen. But other than that, the DVR has disengaged the idea that you need to sit at a specific time to watch your show. And now I can fast forward to commercials. You know? You can even actually, on your cable box, plug it into your computer and upload the video onto your computer and then download it onto a DVD. And so you don't need to go buy DVDs of your favorite show. If you like Desperate Housewives, you can actually hook it into your computer, either upload on YouTube or just keep it there and then download it onto a DVD. You can play on your DVD player. So there are issues here with the money-making capacity of these companies. But before we get to all of that stuff, let me show you just cursory what some of these companies are into. Anybody have a favorite? Who wants to see what GE has? How about Disney? Just a couple people. How about News Corp? That's Fox. Time Warner? Viacom? We're voting on this. Because we can't look at all of these. Alright, I'll just pick one. I'll pick Viacom because this is the one. Alright, let's pick Viacom. If we have time, we'll do more. Look at, these are some of the channels you know Viacom as. MTV, Nickelodeon, with Nick at Night as well. VH1, BET, Comedy Central, Paramount Pictures, Paramount Home Entertainment, Adam Entertainment, music game developer Harmonix. Viacom 18 is a joint venture with the Indian media company Global Broadcast. So they do news in India as well. Okay, let's just look at some of the things they have. All right, so that's most of the TV stuff. Let's look at radio. So there you see MTV Radio, BET Radio. That's not much. Publishing. Stream Music Library, you have Nickelodeon Magazine, Director's Cut Production. Viacom is mostly a production film. Here's a film thing. MTV Films, Nickelodeon Movies, Paramount Classics. Here's online holdings. Look at this. And you notice most of these, except for things like Rhapsody, most of these are either connected. So Spike TV is theirs too. That's the channel for men. Anyway, which they have a TV show called Mansers, where at the end they have girls in bikinis jumping on trampolines. I'm not kidding. You can't make something like that. Well, you could, but it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, but things like these are mostly connected to their channels. Some of these are game sites where one of the goals is, Disney does this very well, they put a lot of games on their website to attract children. One of the games that they have, there's this show called Shake It Up, which is about dancing. It stars these two young girls. One of them named Zendaya Coleman, the other one's Bella Thorne. And they have a game based on their TV show. I'm writing a book on this. Don't look at judgment in your eyes is judgment in your mind, your heart and soul. So, anyway. I'm more interested in the fact that they keep selling this entertainment lifestyle to kids. Every single one of Disney's shows is about somebody trying to get famous. Except for Selena's show, which is about a dysfunctional family of wizards. Turn each other into animals and all kinds of weird stuff. So anyway, but on that show there's a game connected to it on their website called Shop It Up. Where the goal is to go shopping and buy as much garbage as you can. I mean, what lessons are being taught to children? And also some parents might be somewhat concerned, why are you teaching about romance and dating to 11-year-olds? I'm sorry, what's the purpose of that? To sell more crap on Valentine's Day? If you've ever seen a Hannah Montana episode, it ain't nothing but petty crap on that show. That was probably one of the worst shows I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was just horrendous. She's not funny. And as she got older, she got less attractive. The cuteness factor sort of went out of her. There was a point where she got really kind of gangly looking and odd looking. Anyway, and it doesn't help the fact that her dad is probably one of the ugliest people in country music. And he's one of the almost untalented people in country music. I never thought she had any talent. I never understood the appeal of that show. But most of the show was about who has a crush on somebody else, or who's a nerd in school, and how do we make fun of people. They were teaching kids to do this stuff like this and go, hey, loser. I mean, that's the type of stuff that people were learning from Hannah Montana. And if those of you who have younger brothers and sisters, especially younger sisters, you probably stood outside Nassau Coliseum waiting for tickets, or paid $500 for them. And anybody see Hannah Montana live? I heard she's one of the worst singers you could ever hear in your life, like screeching banshees or something like that, beating cats in a bag. I mean, it is horrendous. You know, at least some of these stars can actually sing. Here are some other holdings. So most of these, so they make Rock Band. Okay, let's go to Disney. I think Disney may be a little bit more instructive here. It shows you what. So this is ABC and Disney. Look what they have. Yeah, that's what I told you. They're the biggest, baddest. It's the book calls it the mouse that roars. I told you Disney's big time. They don't play around. They didn't start out like GE making consumer electronics. Disney was in the business from the beginning. And let's face it, look, next to people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, who has had more of an impact on American culture than Walt Disney? I mean, seriously, name somebody. Name a singular figure like Walt Disney. He built two of the most recognizable theme parks in the entire world. I remember as a kid, maybe you guys feel differently about that. When the Disney Castle thing came up on a movie, you knew it was going to be good. Didn't you? You knew it was going to be entertaining. And very rarely does Disney make, except for Hannah Montana, very rarely does Disney make these stupid movies now. And they've got movies that are, like, there's this one movie coming out that they're doing, it's called John Carter. I'm not sure if this is a comic book. Is this a comic book?
I don't know, but it's strange.
Right, but it's being advertised on kids' shows on Disney. And it looks like it's more of a PG-13 rated film. So, but it's interesting. So here's the thing with Disney especially, and I think I mentioned this before. They get you from the beginning of your life to the end. Not by necessarily creating content that a 55-year-old man or a woman would want to see, but usually when you're 55 you have kids and potentially grandkids, right? And I'll tell you one thing right now. At least I admit that I enjoy some of these shows on Disney. And I'm not like some of these adults who take their 6-month-old children down to Disney World and try to act like it's for the kids. 6-year-olds don't remember what they did 5 minutes ago. How much stuff do you remember when you were 6 months old? So these parents, and they do this stuff on Christmas too, they buy an electric race car set or something like for the kids. It's like he's 8 months old. Can't even play with the thing. You know? So parents really do. And I'll tell you right now, if you watch Shrek or Finding Nemo, there's a lot of adult content in there. Not smoking and drinking and sex, but adult type of stuff where if you didn't understand certain words or concepts, when you're a 5-year-old, you're not going to get it. And Shrek especially's got these elements of it too. So they appeal not only to the younger crowd, and they also have a lot of things for teens and tweens, and then they also get into the young adult crowd by doing other things like movies and stuff like that. I don't think, they didn't do Twilight, did they?
No.
Anybody know who produced that?
Some did.
Okay, all right. And then Harry Potter, for example, was Time Warner, I believe, or Warner Brothers or something like that. But again, Disney gets people, and then when you become parents, you get your kids involved in Disney, and then you're watching. And I'll tell you right now, Disney is about one of the other reasons why they're so smart. They take things like, first of all, Beauty and the Beast, which is not their story, or like one of these grim fairy tales like Cinderella. Like, for example, Beauty and the Beast has been put out in the movies. It's been a Broadway show. It now is coming out in 3D again. They're re-releasing it, and they've re-released it at least 3 or 4 times. It's like, to me, it reminds me of George Lucas. George Lucas is the master of making money. They're going to release The Phantom Menace again on February 10th on 3D. And what's interesting as well is, remember he released Star Wars Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi back-to-back in the special edition, and it was the only movie in the history of the film industry that was #1 twice. It made like $200 million when they re-showed Star Wars in the theaters because another generation had never seen it in the theaters. And let's face it, you can have the biggest TV in the world. I'd still rather sit in the movie theater as long as there ain't popcorn on my seat or like sticky stuff on the floor or whatever it is. You know? So Disney does this stuff. They'll release stuff on DVD. Many times they'll do movies just for their channel. It's brilliant. It's actually brilliant. So, and if you look at this, and some of you say, I don't pay attention to Disney content. Oh yeah?
It's crazy. It's scary.
And Disney bought ABC, I want to say about 15 years ago. And I'm sure people at ESPN didn't like it. And I'll tell you what, ESPN does this ESPN The Weekend. Guess where they do it? Disney World. I'm surprised they don't show the Orlando Magic more. I think at one point Disney owned that. Disney owned the Anaheim Ducks for a while too. I don't think they do anymore now. So, but you remember they made a movie called The Mighty Ducks, and only Disney can, or very few other companies can do this. Then they made a professional hockey. They forced the NHL to create a professional hockey team that was a creation of their fictional movie. You know, isn't that crazy? Didn't they win the Stanley Cup? Did the Ducks ever win the Stanley Cup? I know they got to the final.
They did, yeah.
Did they win it? With Korea, anyway. ESPN Classic, ESPN Pay-Per-View, Deportes, all this stuff. A&E, ABC Channel, Toon Disney, all this stuff. So History Channel, Lifetime. It's a 50% equity, so they own that stuff. Here are international channels. 226 affiliated local stations that they have. Good Morning America, World News with Charlie Gibson. The World News Now, 2020, Prime Time, This Week, ABC, Playhouse, Disney, Monday Night Football. I mean, they own all of these things. You see all this crazy stuff. And that's just their TV holdings. Let's go to publishing. Look at this. I didn't know this, but they run Bassmaster magazine. That's hilarious. You wouldn't expect that. Here's film. I don't think they own Pixar anymore. They still have a relationship with them. But you remember, how many people here have seen Toy Story? You guys looked at me being weird watching Hannah Montana, and I could say the same thing about you watching Toy Story. That's for like 8-year-old kids. Some of you 8 when you saw it? How many of you, though, you were an adult when Toy Story 2 came out and you still saw it? See? Why? This is an important thing. I mean, why is it so?
I always watched it when I was young. Just resonated.
But isn't it a gigantic advertisement? It reminds me of the Transformers. Remember the first Transformers movie? What was that an advertisement for? Chevy, yeah. Camaro. Bumblebee is not a Camaro. That upset... I remember leaving the theater. I swear I repeated that to my friend and to myself loudly in the lobby of the movies probably 5 times in a row, going, Bumblebee is not a Camaro. What is he?
I don't know what he's not gonna
He's a VW Bug. That's why they call him Bumblebee. Right? Which is funny because Hitler designed a VW Bug. So I guess the Transformer people forgot about that. Anyway. Every time I see a VW... And the funny thing is the Bug is a real cute car and it came out of some lunatic's head, you know? Hitler designed that specifically. So it was actually called the Volkswagen, means people mover. Anyway. Buena Vista, all this stuff. So Marvel Studios. That's another one as well. They do comic books. Here's Online Holdings. Here's all their other ones. Let's look at News Corp. Wow, they control the Big Ten network. No wonder I keep getting. But look at all this. They got stuff in Europe, Latin America, Asia, Australia, New Zealand. They got sports channels, news channels. What the funny thing is, and this is Fox, technically. This is Rupert Murdoch. This is the one that got in trouble with the phone hacking scandal in Great Britain, right? And they brought... This should show you, and Bagdickian probably wrote about this. I'll try to see if I can find some commentary on it. Fox News was so obsessed, or at least the British tabloids that they control were so obsessed with getting information about a murder case, they hacked into a dead person's phone to listen to her messages. I mean, and let me ask those of you who know technical stuff, is it easy to hack into someone's cell phone like that? That doesn't seem like a 5-minute job. That's like a few days at least, right? If you're a really good hacker. And for them to put that type of effort into that, and that's a violation of the law. And these people were arrested. And they brought Rupert Murdoch up in front of Parliament, in front of a little committee, and his son too, and grilled him about why did you do this and all this other stuff. But again, one of the interesting things here is that Fox News Channel is considered to be what politically? Conservative or liberal? But FX shows all kinds of sick shows. There's a cartoon on FX called Unsupervised. Anybody seen this? Did you see it? It was sick, wasn't it? I mean, is that something you'd let a kid watch? I wouldn't let most adults watch that, you know, if they were imbalanced or something. It was the show was about these kids who were left essentially to their own devices. They're in like high school, and the episode I saw, they threw an enormous party where people were drinking. Some other guy was huffing whipped cream. There was supposedly sex going on and all kinds of vulgar talk. And again, what I find funny, and Fox itself is that way. Have you ever seen The Simpsons? They're the ones who came out with the Dysfunctional Family as a sitcom and Married with Children. Before The Simpsons, the big show on Fox was Married with Children. And I remember the first time I turned on Married with Children, I was like, what the hell is this? You know, because I'd never seen anything like this. You know, it was like the All in the Family on steroids or something, or acid, or both. But again, one of the things you see here is a contradiction in that Fox News is somewhat conservative, but the Fox channels is about as liberal as it gets. I'm not kidding you, and I'll look this up. There was a show on Fox at one point, and it almost seems like a joke, when animals make love. I'm not kidding you. And they showed animals having sex. That was like their idea of like a show. I can't, you know, I wouldn't make that up unless it was true. But for them to do that and then not even like make a comment about it that this is some kind of weird thing to show. So again, even though you know these companies own a lot of networks, it doesn't necessarily mean they speak with one voice. But it is kind of weird some of the contradictions that come up. What is this? All right. Let's go back to the slideshow. I think this is where we stop. I'm gonna raise the board up here in a minute, and I'm gonna present the details of the propaganda model and look at that stuff here. So anyway. So one of the impacts of this oligopoly, and an oligopoly is different than a monopoly, and a monopoly is controlled by one company like Standard Oil. Oligopoly is, you have 4 or 5 major companies in an industry. If you actually look at retail sales in this country, it's an oligopoly. You have Target and Walmart, and name another one. You know, and you mess with either one of those companies, and you're going down. Don't start unionizing around them either. Anyway. But like I said with this little diagram here, the range of acceptable discourse is narrowed. Communist thought is not allowed on TV in America, but is censorship. And even things like this. How many shows do you see that have satanic characters on it? Or that talk about Satanism? How about this? How many atheist characters do you see on TV? Maybe on The Big Bang Theory? That's about it. So even things like anti-religious types of things don't get on TV, do they? And you often don't see many people promoting drug use, although you do see it. You certainly get situations like, I think somebody mentioned something in this class, or maybe it was my other class, that Seth Rogen at one point admitted that he was stoned when he wrote all of his screenplays. Did you mention that to me, Martin, in the last semester? Right, but that type of stuff gets upsetting to people. Or like, the proof is, look at the reaction that people gave Michael Phelps for taking a bong hit. They acted like he killed 20 children or something, you know? Or even, remember the reaction to the Janet Jackson debacle? People acted like it was the end of the world or something. Her boob came out. Grow up. I've seen worse on National Geographic specials. They let 7-year-olds watch that stuff. I always think it's funny. At sex ed, they show you everything. Sometimes they show you a film on how a baby's born. Then they get upset when Janet Jackson has this incident, which I think she did on purpose. Anyway, poor Justin Timberlake. I turned it as soon as he came on, and I didn't even see it live. I turned it back, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, did you see?" I was like, "What happened?" And they never. Of course, they weren't going to show it again. I had to go online to see it. So anyway, she had this gigantic star thing on it. So I meant to do that on purpose. Janet's just that way. Okay. Anyway. One of my favorite Jacksons. Anyway, the media focuses on profitable content and many times appeals to the lowest common denominator. Here's another element here. Sexual content, violence, sensational events, and tragedies. How does this impact the news, or does it? We know that this occurs with movies, right? How does this playing to the lowest common denominator and using sensational content, does that make its way into the news, and how?
not to post it.
Well, at least I think editors feel that way. If you've ever watched the local news, what is it about? Is it all cheery and fun and talks about how great it is to be in the tri-state area, or is it, you're never going to believe this story? Parents, lock your doors right now. Go buy a security system for ADT. Oh, our news show is brought to you by ADT. You almost think that the news corporations are working for these security companies, don't you? The way they scare the hell out of people? Because I'm telling you right now, where I live in Suffolk County, there hasn't... I don't live by Gilgo Beach. There hasn't been a murder, and I've been living there for 9 years. There hasn't even been so much as there was an argument outside about one of the neighbors was arguing about the dogs barking. That's about it. But everybody, and I mean everybody in that neighborhood has a security system in their house. Everybody. And where I live, there's a former NYPD cop across the street, and he's always home. What's the point? Unless he's the one doing this. Maybe that's why he's a former. Anyway. But again, it's absurd. And one of the things that we're going to look at when we get to the cultivation book is that people who watch a lot of local news tend to have a greater sense of a fear of crime and tend to overestimate murders and things like that. And that's one of the issues. Here's one of the other issues. When they're talking about, for example, I saw a story about a 2-year-old drowning in a bucket. Which again is one of the things is that the news loves weird stuff. So if a pigeon drops a rock on someone's head and they die, that will be the lead story because it's so weird, right? Or someone drinks paint or something like that. And first of all, it makes people look crazy, doesn't it? After you watch Channel 12 for long enough, don't you start to have less faith in human beings? I mean, if you really took that stuff literally, you start not to think very well of human beings, like, my God, listen to what this person did, blah, blah, blah. It's ignoring the fact that most people don't do that kind of stuff. Secondarily, when they're talking about sensational stuff, what aren't they talking about? What should the news... I think this is a better question. You as young people, I'm a news editor, what do you want to hear from the news? Local or national or otherwise. What do you want to hear from the news? Because obviously most of you probably don't read the news on a regular basis. If you do, it's Yahoo News or Google News. How many people, you read a newspaper? How many people here watch the local news at night? Bet your parents do, don't they? And they tell you stuff. Right? Watch out. There's crazy knife-wielding lunatics on the subway. There always is! I'll tell you right now, you ever been through Central Park? You ever been through the Bramble? That's a murder waiting to happen. Oh my God, I think there's people in the bushes doing heroin and like sharpening their knives at the same time or something, although heroin addicts usually don't become murderers. They're usually too lazy. Anyway, who here watches the national news program? Who here gets news off Yahoo? How about Google? You get it from your Facebook thing. RSS feed? Okay? So you guys have read newspapers and you have seen at least some stories or whatever, either it's an AP Wire story or whatever. What do you want from news? Why don't you watch it more? What do you want? What information should it give you instead of children drowning in buckets or people drinking paint or frat parties gone wrong? Does that really touch you personally? What the hell do I care about Scott Peterson? You guys remember Scott Peterson killed his wife and all that stuff? I mean, that's tragic and it's terrible and it's sick, but the news media obsessed about that for months. Even the OJ case, that's got nothing to do with me. I'm not friends with OJ, I don't live in California, I don't give a damn. I mean, I hate to sound insensitive, but come on. You know? When my mom died, nobody put it in the newspaper. They didn't have a fund for me. And nobody said, oh, man, that's too bad. Here, why don't you take 2 years off of work paid so you can deal with your mourning? No, I had to go right back to school. Go ahead.
Oh, kind of good news?
What do you mean?
Like, things that would distract us from, trouble that we're already having.
Or at least maybe give you a sense that human beings aren't all people who drown their children in buckets and make people drink paint and hide. Like, there was one story in Muttontown, this really wealthy suburban couple was keeping a slave in their house. Only in Muttonville, right? That's why they call it Muttonville. There's actually a road in Muttonville called Bungtown Road. And I'm sitting there going, what, Beavis and Butthead name this, or what? You know? Wait for I Am Cornholio or something like that. Anyway, what else? What are some other things that you want to know? How about larger trends? The news media tends to focus on very specialized issues. a singular murder. What would you rather hear than just one murder or one person losing their job? What do you want to hear from the media? What are you concerned about in the future? What do you want more information about?
More like who's losing the most jobs where.
Right. Hey, give me some information about, hey, what companies are laying people off? What industries are hiring? What's the employment situation like for the next 10 years? You guys are going out in the job market. You need that information. How about instead of one murder, how about the murder rate in my neighborhood? You ever heard of that one? Can't you give me at least a little context? That's what many people consider, that stories in the news lack context. That they don't say, in general, Suffolk County is very safe, but we think there's a serial killer on the loose. Here are the details, right? How about more stories about the things corporations do, right? Their behavior behind the scenes. Why aren't you going to get that?
Because it's run managed. That's where money comes from.
Right, you're just not going to get that kind of stuff. You want to know, here's the thing. Have you read a story about where the TARP money went and how it was used and how it was being paid back? How about what's going on in North Korea? I haven't heard about that lately. Syria, all this other stuff, right? Hey, how about this? We have troops in Afghanistan. Do you know what's going on in Afghanistan? I think that's pretty important, don't you? I mean, it's absurd. Now, part of it is the news media, again, because it runs on profit. Why do you think they don't run stories on Afghanistan? It's a pretty simple equation here, I think. We sort of got to it with the people drowning in the buckets. Why don't people want to hear anything from Afghanistan? Why do Afghanistan stories not sell?
It's kind of like, it goes back to like the thing like, oh, we're not in Afghanistan, we're in America, like that's not going to happen.
Right, or at least that I don't know anybody who's there. It's a confusing situation. It's violent. It's hard to explain in a quick soundbite. It depresses people. It makes people feel that they're out, that they don't have control. And again, it's an element of distance. And I'll tell you right now, I've talked to soldiers who've come back, and they said it's like they're shocked at the lack of coverage. You know, especially when we were still in Iraq to a heavy extent. We had 2 wars going on, and and you could watch the entire evening news and not hear one thing out of Afghanistan or Iraq.
I feel like it's the backlash too, that if they have this out on TV like what happened in Vietnam.
Right, you don't want... One of the issues clearly is preventing the military from looking bad. And the military makes tremendous mistakes. And when they make mistakes, unlike other people where it's, oops, I stubbed my toe, when the military makes mistakes, 300 people die or more. There was an incident where the NATO forces had attacked, I think it was a Pakistani force. They accidentally killed a bunch of Pakistanis. It was a little blip of a news story in the United States. I assure you on Al Jazeera, they talked about it for 4 weeks. Okay? And Americans are just, at least there's a perception among newspaper editors and TV news editors that Americans are not interested in stories about the national debt. They're not interested in stories about Medicare and Medicaid, unless you can personalize them, right? Unless you can turn them into a story about, this is Agnes, and she lost her health care last year, you know, stuff like that. Okay? Anyway, so this is a serious problem for news. And it also is a serious issue in general for kids media because, again, with cable channels, do you think kids... I sometimes think I watch Disney more than 9-year-olds because I'm studying it. But the thing is, 9-year-old, 9, 10, 11, when you start moving into the tween years, you start to seek out stuff that your parents don't want you to see. Many children, this is called the attractiveness of the taboo object. Just like when you tell kids not to smoke cigarettes, they're going to be curious more than they probably should have been. And similar with adult content. When you put stuff at the beginning of a TV show or a movie that says adult content and TVR and TV mature, NA is like, that's nudity and violence, right? I mean, that's right up the 11-year-old's alley. That's exactly what they want to see. And studies have shown that early exposure to R-rated movies many times leads to initiation of things like drug use and drinking and sexual behavior. Like, all of you have seen Superbad, right? Would you let a 10-year-old watch Superbad? Here's what I love about this. That's an R-rated movie, isn't it? You need to be 17 or be accompanied by an adult to get in. First of all, do they really check this stuff too seriously at the movies? Like, it reminds me of, there was a Simpsons episode and Bart went to go take this. He had a, you know, the Big Brother program, he had a little brother. and he took them to the movies, and they were going to go see this horror movie, and he goes, 2 tickets for the Diversity Kittens, and then they went into the horror movie. So first of all, it's pretty easy for kids to go into R-rated. I told you, my parents let us watch Jaws when I was 8, and I was scared to death for weeks after that some shark was going to come out of the carpet and eat my legs or something like that. I mean, and really, because kids don't have the emotional ability to distinguish between real fear and fake fear. And one of the issues is with Superbad, for example, which is filled with drug and alcohol and sexual content and unbelievable language. Jonah Hill, I think, must have taken a cursing class before he took that role. That is about high schoolers. And it is targeted towards a high school audience. There's no doubt about it that is targeted towards a young adult audience, and I mean 12 and up. And it reminds me very similarly of the way tobacco and alcohol companies behave. Do you really think, look, I'm in my 30s. You couldn't pay me to drink Four Loko. Yeah, who else would like wine coolers? Only 13 and 14-year-old, and some women like those things. Otherwise, I mean, who's drinking Zima? Who's drinking this stuff? Who's drinking the hard lemonade and stuff? Like, that is for kids. To make it taste good. You know, I'm serious. Or people who don't like the taste out. I understand that completely. There are people who drink wine coolers because they cannot stand the taste of beer or hard alcohol or any of that stuff. Anybody like that? Huh? What do you mean?
I drink those things.
No, as I said, some people do, but they are certainly one of the reasons why I say that Four Loko is targeted. Look at the can. It looks just like one of these energy drinks. It's all colorful and crazy looking. It's very sweet tasting. Doesn't it have caffeine in it?
It used to.
A lot of sugar.
Something like, yeah. So there's an attempt to drown a lot of young people. I remember the first time I tasted beer, my stepdad, I kept bothering him about it. I was probably 12. And I was like, and I think my mom was, and they were a little bit drunk. And my mom goes, just let him have a drink. And I took a drink, and it was like, and your taste buds are different. Like, I hated broccoli when I was a kid. I would eat it all day long. I mean, maybe not all day long. But anyway, I remember taking a drink and like, ugh! And same with coffee. When you're young, your taste buds are very different. They're very sensitive. I remember when I was a kid, when I would eat spaghetti, and when there was onions in it, I'd spit it back out and put them on. And I remember my parents going, what the hell's wrong with this kid? Or other people, I've seen people eat peanut M&Ms and suck the chocolate off the peanut and put the peanut on. That's what kids do. I mean, some kids do that. Some people, this goes into their adulthood. Other people, your taste buds develop differently, right? And I'm telling you that there is no doubt in my mind that part of the reason why they make this fruity alcohol stuff, like this hard lemonade, is so that 12 and 13-year-olds will drink it. Do you really think Budweiser is unaware of the fact that probably 20% of their sales come from kids under the age of 21? Are they giving that money back? Is the federal government investigating this? Well, look, Budweiser, we know what you're doing. You know, they ought to investigate it. The Zigzag Paper Company. Who rolls their own cigarettes? Yeah, that thing's been in business for 40 years. I mean, rolling cigarettes went out in the 1880s. I know a few people in Alaska who did it. That's about it. Same with blunts, cigars. The only reason why 7-Eleven is stocked to death with those things. Nobody smokes those damn things. When have you ever seen anybody? I always love the person who comes in and buys a lighter and buys nothing else. Give me a lighter. I'm sitting there going, crack? Heroin? What are you doing, man? Give me a torch. You got any ether? Anyway. 3, the media does not seek to educate and is bad for children. Here's one of the functions, or at least impacts, of the media monopoly, and exploits them, teaching them the wrong lessons and exposing them to adult worlds too early. Neil Postman said this in Amusing Ourselves to Death. So you see here, there are a lot of issues with, and we'll come back to this slideshow. Let me see if we got anything else. Part of the slideshow is also for later. We talked about this last time. We will come back to this slideshow. What I want to show you is one of the things that Bagdikian talks about, and is backed up partly. So keep this little cone thing I drew in there in mind. One of the things that Bagdikian is sort of suggesting That's another theory by these scientists. They're actually linguistic scientists, Herman and Chomsky. They wrote a book in 1988 called The Political Economics of the Mass Media. And what they said was, and in the third chapter, I believe it's all in news that's not fit to print. No, it talks about the internet on it. We'll get to the, we'll go along, you'll see this as a factor, and again, we'll discuss this. Today we're going to talk about some things that get excluded from the media. But one theory is this idea that because there is this corporate control of the media, and because the media themselves are dependent upon other corporations, that it leads to a form of censorship. And most countries, Chomsky started out with this idea. He said, look, you guys look at China and say, oh, your media is not free. The government controls things, they censor stuff. Soviet Union, the same thing at the time in 1988. A lot of countries are like this. Even countries you wouldn't suspect. Like Brazil at one point had a very controlled sort of state media. Even the British, the BBC is maybe not censored, but certainly it's controlled by the government. And for Americans, some at least, especially in the media industry, say, well, you know what, we're way better, our media is way better and more balanced than anybody else's out there because we don't listen to the government. The government doesn't decide what stories we do. But unfortunately, again, we have this element of the concentration of economics in businesses inside. So what Chomsky and Herman talked about, and it's backed up by Bagdikian, is that this idea that there's not political censorship necessarily coming from the government in the United States, but the concentration of ownership among media companies themselves creates a situation that filters out undesirable information. So Herman and Chomsky said there's 5 filters that prevent certain information from getting through to the public that might make corporations look bad or select politicians. And the first one is what we've been talking about the whole time. So the first one is concentration of ownership. The second one is the role of ads, B2B collusion. Now let me show you what can happen when you have an instance where corporations are allowed to operate with impunity, meaning that they don't get called out on what they do. This is a story from a UK paper. I couldn't even find an American paper that talked about this. This is a story. Sorry. This is a story about iPod City. It says they sleep 100 to a room, toil for 15 hours a day, and are paid just £27 a month, which is about $40. So less than $1 a day, which means they're making about 8-9 cents an hour. Huh? Well, yeah, like I said, it's slightly over. It's about $40 a week or so, $45. It depends on the value of the pound. Anyway, but again, that's not really, even in China, that's very little to live on. And here's the other part. They charge them for room and board. So they don't actually get that $40. They get a lot less. This is life in iPod City, once the Chinese fishing village of Shenzhen, but now home to the factories that churn out millions of Apple's astonishing popular music players every year. This is just iPods. This isn't iPads or iPhones. Relentless demand for the world's coolest gadget means production lines never come to a standstill. In the UK alone, Apple has sold more than 2 million of the MP3 players with their iconic white headphones. Apple reported in the last quarter that they sold 7.6 million iPhones alone. The new 4S iPhone. And out of the 9, and that was out of 9 million phones that was operated. The operation was initiated on a phone plan, which means that out of the smartphones that were sold in the United States, almost near to over 70%, or around 70% of them, were Apple products. Man, talk about locking up the industry. And the beautiful thing about Apple's perspective is they're not running a monopoly. They just got everybody thinking that it was the coolest thing in the world. Here's the problem. When you're the coolest thing in the world and everybody comes in, it's like punk music. Everybody started liking it, all of a sudden it wasn't cool anymore. That's exactly how things happen. When your grandpa's hanging out with his iPhone, I think it's starting to lose its cool. Okay, when Aunt Tilly's messing around with her iPad, it's going to start to lose its coolness, and I think that's one of the things Apple has to prevent, getting oversold and overexposed. Okay, whereas Samsung's going to come in and say, see, here's our phone, you don't have to wait in line for it. Anyway, but despite Apple's carefully cultivated California cool image, they are assembled in China by staff such as Zhao Yanhua. As a line manager, Zhao earns $80 a month, almost 3 times the salary of a new worker, and just enough to free him from the regimented Spartan factory dormitories. Dorms are single-sex, with more than 100 people in a single large room, and it's mostly young women. In China, if you were a girl, you were looked upon like you were a burden to your family. One of the reasons why, and this is similar in Indian society, in order to marry a woman off in Asian society, you usually have to give a dowry. And it's usually like somewhere anywhere from 1/4 to half of your entire wealth. So what they do is and there's one-child policy as well. So if you have more than one child, and you live out like in the western part of China, which is more rural, the government doesn't demand that you send your child off to a factory, but you usually do.
So,
Go ahead.
If everybody sends off their daughters,
Not everybody.
then,
Farm families do this, or people who have more than one child. Ideally, you want a son, which is causing a serious imbalance in male and female ratio in China. It's really bad. It's like 30 million more men than women. And you can see what kind of a problem that's going to cause. You get 30 million sexually frustrated men who don't have any prospect of marriage or having kids. They're going to be very upset with the government over that stuff. You know, what are you going to do, import women?
I just read an article yesterday how like an Afghanistan man who killed his wife because she had a daughter, and he just killed her because she wanted a son.
Yeah, and again, there have been stories out of China that when some couples, because of the one-child policy, what this speaks to is the way women are viewed in certain parts of the world, and how people look on things like revenge killing. In Afghanistan, when the Taliban was in control, if a woman was raped, she went to jail for adultery. Okay, the guys didn't go to jail for anything. But in China, for example, there have been stories of infanticide, late-term abortions, to get rid of female children. And again, I told you, and like you were hinting, that's going to cause a serious social order problem again. I'll tell you right now. I really do think, and people think I'm crazy with this, I really think a big part of why the Egyptian Revolution took place was, first of all, there are a lot of elite men in that country who have 6 or 7 wives. So for every extra wife that guy has, there's a young man out there who's not going to have a wife. A lot of people were well educated in Egypt and were selling rotten fruit on the side of the road because of Hosni Mubarak, who was 82 years old and had 9 wives and like $5 or $6 billion. And I think these young people looked around and said, "We ain't got a job. We got all this education. I'm never going to get a woman. You guys are going to die. What do I have to lose sitting here bringing up a zero for the rest of it? Selling fruit on the side of the road to tourists at the pyramid? That's why I went to college?" Because it takes a lot for people to go out in the street and get shot at, doesn't it? You guys want to do that? We can go do it right now. Let's go down to Wall Street to threaten them. I have to edit that. They go, "Come on out here to AIG." I'll get boxing gloves on. "Come on out here like men." Right? Anyway. We're just people. I've seen women box, so I wouldn't get in the ring with Layla Ali, so anyway. They're really overcrowded. There are too many people for comfort, but they are free. That's what they say. Now I pay rent and have to share a bed with my colleague who works a different shift. It costs $20 a month, but it's better than the dorm. That's nice rent. Probably looks terrible, but anyway. They're very heavily monitored. There's even a guard in the dormitory, and no visitors are allowed. The factory is very strict, and there are 2 places where you are searched. Both have metal detectors, so you cannot take anything into work, such as your phone. You even have to take off your watch. Security is tight throughout the complex with police on gates, CCTV, and barbed wire everywhere to prevent industrial espionage. I don't think that anybody's trying to steal your secrets of how to abuse workers. Okay? I think America did this in the 1890s. Factories in the United States weren't much better than this, frankly. The workers are discouraged from speaking to strangers for the same reason. There was a monologuist named Mike Daisy who actually went down to, it was an iPad, or iPhone City, and what had happened was a worker had taken one of the iPhones and taken pictures of the factory conditions, and then it was mailed to somebody, mailed to the store, and somebody bought it. And when they bought it and activated it, these pictures were on there, and it became a story. And then Mike Daisey actually went to China and did this, and now he does some stuff off Broadway where he talks about what he found. And you remember, those of you who pay attention to the news, remember the suicides at Foxconn, this is what company they're talking about. Remember that instead of making working conditions better, what did they do? They put up nets to catch the people like fish jumping out of a tank, right? Huh? Go ahead. What'd you say? Alright. Good joke, bad? Sometimes bad jokes are good jokes, unless they're offensive. Then you have to tell them in private. A year ago, Zhao left us. Don't do it on YouTube. This is a private joke for a million people to see. Left his home in central China and joined the flood of workers heading to the industrial sprawl of Shenzhen, just across the border from Hong Kong. In 1980, it was just a sleepy fishing village. Probably been better, and they kept it that way. But then the communist government designated a special economic zone. Now it's home to 12 million people. One of the biggest employers is Taiwanese electronics giant Foxconn, which manufactures the iPod Nano for Apple. Foxconn has 200,000 workers, beavering away. I love that. That's such a British term. And 10 large factories. Americans wouldn't use that word beavering for many, many reasons. First of all, it's kind of a... Anyway, there's a bad joke. Anyway, and 10 large factories and 11 research units in a sprawling complex covering several square kilometers. Salaries start at 27 pounds a month. Outside, posters appeal for workers age over 16, and many of them lie, while a steady stream of new arrivals are herded into the dormitories, carrying their few possessions and maybe a bucket to wash their clothes. They're guaranteed jobs. They usually don't have showers in these dorms. Just a faucet where you can just wipe your face off. They're guaranteed jobs under strict rules and discipline, and often work 7 days a week, foregoing many freedoms and pleasures Western workers take for granted. There are virtually no safety or environmental standards. So if they're making things with caustic chemicals, they're being fully exposed to these things. Also, in general, most toys are also made in China. And what was the issue with toys a little while ago coming from China? You guys remember? They had toys. They had melamine and dog food and powdered milk. Kids were dying. You know what? Here's the difference between Chinese government and the U.S. government. The people they found guilty of that milk scandal, you know what they did to them? Off with your head. Like the Queen of Hearts. And they did that. They did that on purpose and put that story out there to say to the rest of these people, and also send a signal to the rest of the world. Hey, China doesn't mess around. We ain't playing games here. I never thought they messed around anyway. Anyway, they don't do that in the United States. As well as no visitors being allowed on a huge site, staff rarely venture out of the heavily guarded gates. Instead of meals out or films, any cash they save is usually sent home to their families, and that's the way Chinese people are raised. An insider says they get up, work, eat a small bowl of noodles and rice, which is probably badly prepared, do their washing, go to bed, get up, and do it all over again. That sounds like mom, right? After sleeping in shifts, they slip into a uniform of jeans and beige jacket and head for the factory in a long, orderly crocodile. That's very British again. The only break from the routine comes from, I mean, come on, what American would say that? With what's called professional education. Listen to this. Like soldiers on parade, the young men and women are ordered to line up on the factory and are drilled for up to 3 hours, often in searing heat. On occasions, they're required to stand still for hours without moving a muscle. I mean, what kind of nonsense? This is like stuff you do to like basic training in the Army. To like break recruits. These extraordinary exercises were devised to ensure the workers toe the line. China is experiencing an unprecedented capitalist-style economic boom, but many of its methods are still rooted in communist forms of control. An insider says they discourage individualism, effectively turning the workers into robots as much as they can. If you know anything about Asian culture de-emphasizes the role of the individual. It's much more important to be part of the group and be part of the collective, especially in a communist country, than it is to be individual. Anyway. Except, of course, they're a lot cheaper than robots. It's a lifestyle which has already become all too familiar to Zhang Lan, 21. She's been working at Foxconn for a month on the assembly line for Apple computers and is already exhausted. The job here is so-so, she says, but when we have to work too hard, I'm always tired and I'm still in training, which I do not like. Many of them only get 2 to 3 hours of sleep a day. It's like being in the Army. They make us stand still for 3 hours. If we move, we are punished. They do not hit us or anything, but they might make us stand still for longer or make the boys do push-ups. In the Army, sometimes they make you hold buckets like this on your hands filled with water. You have to stand there. The longest day I ever worked so far was 15 hours when I stayed until 11:30. I felt so tired. Compared to European working and living conditions, the lifestyle sounds incredibly harsh, but industry experts insist... Oops. Sorry about that. Gary Bowerman, editor of the Shanghai Business Review, says they do work long hours, they don't get paid very much, but the factories are state-of-the-art. They're really impressive. Yeah, I bet they are. I'm sure that the slaves being beaten building the pyramids was pretty good. The pyramids are impressive too. Okay? Yes, it's monotonous and routine, but the quality of the factories is even better than in Europe. I mean, look, I haven't even been there, but I know you're lying. Okay? They're clean, high-tech, even air-conditioned. Come on. Not sweatshop stuff. So now they're better than the United States. They're purpose-built for high-volume production and have to turn out high quantity and high quality. Last year, Apple achieved a record billion-dollar profit, boosted by the launch of the Nano, the size of a credit card and weighing just 40 grams. It was so popular that Apple sold 1 million in 17 days, including one to the Vatican for Pope Benedict. So he's jamming to like Gregorian chants. Like that. I don't know what he's listening. Maybe he's listening to Aretha Franklin. R-E-S-P-C-T. Anyway. Although it is one of America's most prestigious brands, nearly all Apple's products are assembled abroad. While Foxconn makes the Nano, the iPod Shuffle is put together in Asustek in Suzhou. Sorry, China, for hacking it up. 2 hours outside Shanghai at another sprawling site the size of 8 football pitches. That's British. And employing 50,000 people bordered by a canal and rivers surrounded by barbed wire and alligators and electric eels. Its 6 gates are manned by zealous security guards checking all workers' bags as they enter and leave. Security is especially tight at gate number 5, which leads to the Factory 8, where the iPod Shuffles are manufactured. Think about this. I mean, I assure you, and this is the last point I'll make, and we'll go. You got to think that Apple's going, hey, each one of these things is worth $500. If one single one of your employees steals one of these things, I want them in jail. You can bet that Foxconn at least has made that clear to the employees. Can you imagine how easy it would be to shove a Nano in your pocket? Things are this big, right? Anyway, all right. All right, everybody, we will continue with the propaganda model next time. We'll get to the other 3 filters and then keep up with the reading, and we'll continue with our examination of the news.